Travis Wingutzel. The Joseph Smith history of 1838 that is canonized was a specific portion designed to be what it was. It wasn't until 1839 that he did an actual history when he got out of Liberty Jail after being framed for the Mormon War. And it's important to know how the church knew of this information, because it was published in the Times and Seasons beginning on March 15th, 1842. He had just become a master mason and was about to organize the Relief Society priesthood organization for women. And priesthood. Do you not read your Joseph Smith papers? Do you think you know it all and think that there's nothing new in the Joseph Smith papers that would throw a bombshell on what the church has been lying to us about? Or are you afraid? Are you chicken? You chicken to know the truth? But Richards was the one who took the 1838 writing to England and made it part of his Pearl of Great Price, and so it was brought back to Brigham Young's church when he finished his mission. It was recorded also in Brigham Young's Deseret News, beginning November 15th, 1851. As the Wikipedia page informs me of, and Milton R. Hunter just referred to the original Deseret News article. It's like such incompetence putting information in here. I mean, this in and of itself is enough. We should be able to go to the Deseret News archives and look up November 15th, 1851's newspaper and find it. If the church has thrown it away or destroyed it, that's another question. That's another issue. And so it was not made officially part of Mormon canon until October 10th, 1880, under John Taylor. And so, understand, this was used by Brigham Young, just like the Book of Mormon was used by Brigham Young. And so, as I've got the other video having 7 minutes left to upload, let us go to the Joseph Smith history about the angel Nephi. Again, Joseph Smith papers, guys. Oh, I know everything. But do you understand this? Because it was Willard Richards who rewrote the history for the Deseret News. He rewrote it, edited it, put in Jesus Christ for the name of the church, for example, and other problems and changes and plain and precious parts removed. It was by orders of Brigham Young to Willard Richards, the assassin of Joseph Smith. And again, Joseph Smith papers, guys. You guys think you know it all, and you think the church is true because your spiritual witness told you so, and you're wrong. And you can't deal with the reality that you were wrong, that your spiritual witness led you astray, and you're wrong. And so here I am, giving you a fuller explanation of the truth that you will rebel against. And so, what's on the top of all the temples? Yeah, Moroni. It's because of Willard Richards changing it. And so, yeah, this is why I did the videos prior to conference. Prior to my being shut down, prior to conference. It's because I knew that next year is the bicentennial year of this event in church history. Church history. And sure enough, as I prophesied, the prophets didn't even bring any of it up. None of it. Because they're in a conundrum now. They've released the Joseph Smith Papers. The Joseph Smith Papers reveals the missing information, the correct information of this Willard Richards scandal. And knowing the truth reveals a megaplex of new stuff for you. And if you're going to rebel, thinking you know it all, you're going to perpetuate the lies that you've been taught and told your whole life. And so that's what you need to understand. I was lied to as well. I spread the lies as well. I just came across the Joseph Smith Papers a couple of years ago and began doing the videos, going all out on what I'm finding. And why aren't you? Why are you being complacent, ex-Mormons? You know, I can understand Sandra Tanner. I interviewed her. I went to see her. She chose to be interviewed. I wasn't really interviewing her. She just chose to. And we just had a discussion. It was nice, pleasant. I did the video. But, yeah, her husband died, and it's all up to her now. And so she doesn't have time to do further research on the church. She just keeps going what she's already built up with her husband. But they're the first ones to do the first formation of the original documents and making them available to Mormons. But then she threw in her Christian bias to tamper with it. And so, yeah, it's supposed to be Nephi on all the temples. Nephi. While he was thus in the act of calling upon God, he discovered a light appearing in his room with his brothers in the beds next to him. Yeah, ex-Mormons and Mormons both take this literal. Because he wrote it as if it's literal. It's not literal. There are tons of types and shadows throughout this. Symbolisms. And the apologists for the church are purposely perpetuating Willard Richards' lies so as to deflect and distract from the actual truth. And so even Nelson, you'll hear him perpetuate the standard lies that the church has always been telling us, despite the Joseph Smith Papers. And so I purposely made sure to make a stink about this for next year. The day that shall burn as an oven. And much more. And so, yeah, this isn't literal history, because now you've got a problem. How did... it's transferring over to processing. We'll wait and see. Okay. And so if it were literal history, already we've got questions. Weren't his brothers sleeping in the same bed as the sisters were in the next room at the attic of the house there on the farm? What happened? What's going on? How didn't they wake? Why didn't they wake up? Joseph Smith was awake all night. It was apparently light. And etc., etc., etc. And so obviously it's not literal history. And you can say it was a dream, but Mormons can't. It has to be literal history for Mormons, and all the problems that come with calling it literal history. And they just dismiss the conundrums as, well, you know, we'll find out when we're dead, and if it's essential to our eternal salvation, the prophet will tell us. It's a cop-out. Mormons don't want to learn the truth. Plain and simple. And they're making excuses not to learn the truth, and to stick with their spiritual ways. And so, now let me reveal to you the error in using a spiritual witness over the truth. Looks like it's done. Hold on. Processing 95. And done. It's like the guy isn't working today. It's not Friday. It's Wednesday. Has he got the day off today? I'm not showing a surge in views, so that can't be it. What's going on? And where are the Russians? Where are you guys? You used to give me 1,000 views for my conference talks. That one Saturday. Okay, I'll have to get back to Adam here. Okay, where were we? Alright, so, remember the Book of Mormon? No? You don't believe in the Book of Mormon unless it's literally true? It says that it's written in the learning of the Jews, in the language of the Egyptians. So do you think if the Book of Mormon is written in the learning of the Jews, manner of prophesying, 2 Nephi 25:1, and the language of the Egyptians, that maybe Joseph is going to emulate that for his Joseph Smith history? Maybe. Maybe. Well, here we go. His room has a light appearing in it, which continued to increase until the room was lighter than at noonday. We've already gone over this with First Vision. We've already gone over it with this as well. And I did the 5 different views thing. This is the Egyptian sun god. The Egyptian sun god is Nephi, appearing to Joseph Smith. And it's not literal history. This is Emmanuel. And the church won't even cover it. Why? Because that's the name of the learning of the Jews, language of the Egyptians. They want nothing to do with that. And so it's Jesus and his angels. It's Moroni, not Nephi. Because Willard Richards was ordered to change it. And so, yeah, the personage appears, Emmanuel. And he's defying the laws of physics, defying the laws of gravity, standing in the air, for his feet did not touch the floor, and he could tell that he was male because he could see through his robe. It was a sheer robe, and could tell because he could see that he was naked, clear to his boobs. It says bosom, same thing. You know, some people are sensitive, calling them boobs rather than bosom. And there are lots of other names for them. And so, yeah, you could see that he was male. And that's important for this. Is because he's saying that this is a male personage, Emmanuel, the Egyptian sun god of prophecy. And we're going to get to what that prophecy is, because Joseph Smith tells us where he comes from in prophecy. And so then he spends a whole verse 31 describing how he's naked and male. The robe. Now, if this was a female describing the robe, yeah, I'd be interested. But now, men's clothing, no. I'm into women's fashion, not men's fashion. And that's where I was veered away from women's fashion, even though it was my mom who introduced me to women's fashion with the Sears catalogs. When they expired, she'd set them on the kitchen table, had all of us kids sit at the table, and we'd pull out pages and make collages, and that's where I discovered women. You know, my mom, not a real woman. Sisters, not real women. You know, these strangers in the catalog, they were women. And so he goes on to further describe in 32, not only was his robe exceedingly white, but his whole person was glorious beyond description. And pay attention, and his countenance truly like lightning. If you do not know Jupiter and his symbol, a lightning bolt, which is Zeus's also, because Jupiter is the equivalent of Zeus. Zeus is Greek, Jupiter is Roman.
If you have laundry in the dryers, could you please rotate them out as others are trying to
But that's
use
such a
them as
burden
well.
for people.
Thank you.
We only have 8 dryers. I think they all work. It's the washers that we have upwards of 4 at any given time. For 300 plus people. And so yes, this is Emmanuel's sign as well. Emmanuel was first because the Egyptians were first. And as humans migrated out of Egypt into the rest of the world, they took the Egyptian language and culture, altered it, mutated it according to their migrated geography and their customs and traditions and language. And thus you get Emmanuel, Amen, Zeus, Jupiter, etc., depending on which language and which culture you're referring to. And so he's talking about Jupiter now. There's a reason why, because Jupiter is in the book of Revelation. Lightning is in section 85, verse 8. But we're not going over that one, are we? Nope. But that is part of this thing. It's a branch off from this. And Joseph Smith was afraid, but fear soon left. He's fearing and trembling before the Lord. And he knew Joseph Smith's name, and said unto Joseph that he was a Malachi. That's the Hebrew for messenger, which after Constantine became angel, specifically for those that are doing supernatural stunts in apocalyptic literature, because that's what this is. Joseph is writing apocalyptic literature. That's why it's not literal history, ex-Mormons. Ex-Mormons have caught on that it's not literal history, but then they don't know what it is, because they don't care. It's just the church lied to us, and that's all they need to know. They're out of the church. But they don't care to know what it is. And we see it here, the elements of apocalyptic literature. Joseph is writing in the learning of the Jews, language of the Egyptians, manner of prophesying, apocalyptic literature, book of Revelation. That's why the Book of Mormon also says John, the apostle of the Lamb, will write about the last days. Revelation. And there are star dates in Revelation. Joseph Smith knows this. How do we know this? Because the Joseph Smith translation alters Revelation chapter 12 star date. The big star date that everybody talks about. And Christians turned it into literal history turned Jesus into a real person during the Roman period of time and became the abominable Christ of the great and abominable Church of Constantine, because they now are anti-Semitic towards Jews. And he said unto me, his name was Nephi, and that God had a work for him to do, and that his name should be had for good and evil among all Mormons. Because that's what's happened here. Why is Willard Richards tampering with Joseph Smith's words, other than he's dissing on Joseph? His name, Joseph, is had for evil among the Mormons. And Joseph Smith tells us this at the beginning of this document. Because of evil disposed of persons. I can't remember the exact wording. We're not going to go to it. Not essential. You can read it. And then you can see that he put the wrong name of the church in there in place of what Joseph had. It's because Jesus is the abominable Christ of the great and abominable Church of Constantine, which he goes into specific accusation in the first vision, the first creed of Christianity. And so here we go. He says there was a book deposited, written upon gold plates, not golden, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent and the source from whence they sprang. He also said that the fullness of the everlasting gospel was contained in it, as delivered by the Savior to the ancient inhabitants. And there were 2 stones in a hat in silver bows, and these stones, fastened to a breastplate, constituted what is called a Urim and Thummim, deposited with the plates. Now are you starting to catch on why I talk about my 200-pound Egyptian gold plates and my Urim and Thummim to reveal unto you the signs in the heavens? The things I do for you, the things I do for you, the things I do for you. See what I did there? I took the lyrics, I changed them for a purposeful symbolic meaning. Type it shadow. And the possession and use of these stones are what constituted seers in ancient and former times, which makes me a seer. And that God had prepared them for the purpose of translating the book. Okay? So he sets up the Book of Mormon for us. That's what he's talking about. That it's on Egyptian gold plates. You have to know the Book of Mormon that says it's written in Egyptian.
Brian Abbott, please come down to the clinic area, please. Brian Abbott, down to the clinic area. Thank you.
And when you know the real history of the Smith family, you'll learn that Joseph Smith Sr. was a master mason in Canandaigua, New York, and in the York Rites, there is the highest rank called the Knights Templar. That should have bells ringing for everyone now, because the Knights Templar were hunted down on Friday the 13th by Jason Voorhees. Or, yeah, it is Jason Voorhees for Friday the 13th, isn't it? Or is he Halloween? Michael Myers is Halloween. Okay, we're good. They just came out with a new movie in the theaters, didn't they? Barnes & Noble is closing down their DVD section in February. So I'll have to figure out how to order through Amazon again, despite being here. But the Pope was involved in ordering this in conspiracy with the King of Spain, and he was making accusations saying that they worship Baphomet, another name for a demon creature similar to Satan, but accused them of trusting in reading from Egyptian gold plates rather than the Bible and him as Pope. And so they then took these Egyptian gold plates and fled and made it to America, where they purchased the land, the eastern half of America. And this was the Mandan Indian tribe that they bought the land from, as the Kensington Stone is the receipt for that purchase. And it has the Knights Templar unique rune language, because they took the rune language and they put dots in specific letters to signify that it's Knights Templar. And so the dating is 1363. And then there's a marker trail into the eastern portion that they purchased, and there was a sun god people who worship the sun god in the Sun City and made sacrifices to the sun god of humans right there in southern Illinois. A little bit north and west, but there in southern Illinois. And so pretty much right above where a certain crossroads of a cross over America. The solar eclipses of the latter days in 2017 and 2024. They knew what was coming, because solar eclipses anciently symbolized death of government, king. And so a human sacrifice helped illustrate that point. And thus, why the Book of Mormon talks about the sign of the King of Kings' death. And the Gospels, turned literal history by Constantine, talk about Jesus being nailed to a cross. The Romans didn't use crosses, they used a pole. But Christians want to rewrite history and turn it into a cross that the Romans used. And but that's what they're talking about. It's apocalyptic literature. They're all talking about this. All scriptures, all nations, all religions, all scriptures. You know, Perseus on the white horse, Hercules and Pegasus on the white horse. Now go to Revelation chapter 19. Jesus on a white horse that flies, just like Pegasus. They all use the same features to talk about the same thing. It's just the different cultures, nations, languages do things differently, give them different names, etc. It's all the same thing. It all originated from Egypt. The Egyptians knew about this. Because August 21st, 2017, my jaw dropped. I had purchased an ancient Egyptian religious calendar for the 2017 year, and learned that their new year varies year by year. It's never the same. And so for a total solar eclipse to happen on New Year in 2017 over America, the ancient Egyptians knew. The story of Horus duking it out with Set to restore the kingdom of his murdered father. And you need to understand, this was not back in 3000 BCE that the Egyptians knew this. We're talking way past 12,000 BCE. That's how long, at least, because the flood over the whole earth occurred in 10,500 BCE. Canada and Alberta, archaeologists there were the last ones that I've heard of to confirm that. Here in Alberta, the worldwide flood also affected them. And the archaeologists recognized it and knew it and were able to date it to that. There was a scientific worldwide flood, but it wasn't in 3000 BCE. It was in 10,500 BCE. And so when you learn that it was a Catholic who created the date of 4004 BCE, you can then go, okay, yeah, he didn't know what he was doing. He's obviously wrong. But if you're going to push him as being correct and true, and that the Bible is literal history, you're gonna replace truth and science with fraud of Constantine. And so in Little Egypt and the caves in southern Illinois are supposedly the location of the hidden Egyptian gold plates that John Taylor said Joseph Smith had seen in vision. John Taylor was actually confessing that he knew that Joseph Smith was planning all of this, and that's why the Danites chose Adamant-Diomen as their secret headquarters, to divert Mormons away from knowing about southern Illinois. But I've recently repeated 19 July 1840 that Joseph Smith knew of southern Illinois. Not just because they're Knights Templar. Because Joseph Smith Sr. was also involved in the New Israelites in Vermont. Even though it was short-lived, because of the wood scrape. But it was Jewish mysticism. That's where Joseph Smith learned Jewish mysticism, as well as the York rites with the Knights Templar similarities and comparable features. The bloodline of the Christ from King David, Solomon being the King of Peace, the son of King David, the symbol of the latter-day Christ. And so the York rites have, Masonry has the murder of Hiram Abiff, which represents Osiris. And then their ceremony is about searching for the murderer and who done it, and the need to keep the bloodline a secret. That's what you're not supposed to tell, is the identity of the hidden name of Emmanuel. The hidden name of Emmanuel that Isaiah reveals to us. But, if you get confused, you then start thinking that you're not supposed to expose their little hand signs, otherwise you have to kill yourself. No, if you watch the play, the whole concept of secrecy is within the play. It's not intended for outside, because everybody watched the play. Everybody knew. So you weren't really exposing anything by telling other people, because everybody knew. It's within the play that you keep things a secret, and where the person is initiated. But just screw things up, alter them like Brigham Young did, and then you get blood atonement instead. And so, yeah, the Knights Templar knew, the natives who were there knew, Joseph Smith knew, and the enemy now knows, as I did the video yesterday. That was the question I had posed to you guys in one of my videos not too far back, is that there are too many coincidences here. But the question is, are there remnants of the York Rites of Joseph Smith Sr. who know of the truth, or is it the Scottish Rites who figured it all out like Heber C. Kimball did, as he reveals to us in his Wikipedia page under Masonry? Yeah, Heber knew, and that's why he joined the church, to purposely overthrow it, to make it the Great and Abominable Church. But that's why Utah, their commemorative flag, looks exactly like the Desnat flag. Guess what? It has the cross of the Confederates. Oh, that's just like the first and third day of darkness that is an X marks the spot cross in southern Illinois over America. The solar eclipses. Yeah, they know. They figured it out. Because the York Rites knew, and we're keeping that secret about the bloodline. And so I found out, yeah, with the midterm election, the enemy occupies the land. And so, yeah, if something's going to happen, it's going to have to be a massive miracle beyond anything anybody's capable of performing here on Earth. And I just don't see that happening, because Mormons are rebellious. So everybody knows. Everybody knows. And so that needs to be known here, is the York Rites has, as the Knights Templar symbol, the cross for the latter days, that is referred to in Revelation and all Scripture, as it's all apocalyptic literature, with the headless crown, because it's the future when the king will be crowned. The mortal man, not a supernatural, non-existent entity created by Constantine. And so, yeah, if I'm the only one who knows, we're all doomed. And so, again, he's helping you to illustrate also about the timing of when the Christ that he's referring to here, since he's already dismissed Jesus in the first vision, when he's going to come, when we will know of his coming. His second coming? No, it's his first coming. He's here to restore the kingdom. And and notice it's Joseph who's telling this, who's of the keepers of the Holy Grail, the bloodline secret. And so when he then tells us in section 103 of the Doctrine and Covenants, verse 16, that this Christ, because in verse 40 he says he's the Christ, is a Mormon during this time period. Best time period right now. He's saying that Joseph Smith Sr. is the bloodline for the Christ. for the fulfillment of prophecy. That's bold. But notice Joseph Smith doesn't come right out and just say it. Why would he? Well, he's got people trying to murder him. That's why. And so, yes, Canandaigua, New York. Yeah. That's how Heber knows, because if you read his Masonic history, what are you doing there? Why don't you mention Joseph Smith Sr.? What's going on? And then you may come across William Morgan, because you want to find out about this anti-Mason movement that destroyed Masonry in 1826. And then you'll learn about William Morgan, who was writing a book in Canandaigua, New York, the lodge at Canandaigua, where Joseph Smith Sr. was, as the Master Mason. And he was writing the book with Joseph Smith Sr. at the Canandaigua Lodge in New York. But he doesn't get to finish, because on 9/11, he's arrested, because they don't want him to publish the book. They don't want him to finish it. So 116 pages are not finished. Yeah. Because they found Sidney Rigdon to take the original manuscripts out of the picture, because everybody's looking for him. And they weren't in Batavia, where his home was, which was too far away to casually visit Canandaigua's bar and tavern, because Batavia has one. And so, yeah, the Wikipedia page is sort of not very investigative on this. They're just putting information, and they're not doing a very thorough investigation of the whole thing to give us the accurate account of what happened. It's when you learn of these missing pieces that they did not talk about that you go, hey, wait a minute, there's something else going on here that you're not telling us. Yeah. And so the Book of Mormon is that book that William Morgan was starting to write. But because Joseph lost 116 pages, giving them over to Martin Harris, they had to find out another strategy. They had to rewrite it. And so Sidney Rigdon told them about the manuscript that was unpublished because the guy had died without paying for the publication, the Solomon Spaulding manuscript. And so they used that as a template for the Book of Mormon, for the rewritten part. As Senior took on the responsibility as the Master Mason, it was his duty to make sure the book got published. And so with his son botching it, it was Senior's responsibility to rewrite the 116 pages, which became 1st and 2nd Nephi. Nephi. Just like Kings. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Kings. You know 1st and 2nd Kings as 1st and 2nd Samuel, the name of God. And Samuel the Lamanite, the name of God. It talks about signs in the heavens for the latter days. 2017 for the birth, 24 for the death. But it's literal history, Travis. It's literal history. Well, you're missing what's being told to you here. And so, yes, because we're dealing with the latter days, apocalyptic literature, guess what he goes into next? He starts quoting prophecies from the Old Testament. Okay? And so these prophecies from the Old Testament include Malachi, Isaiah, Joel, and Acts. That is a clue for you guys that you're supposed to go, wait a minute, that's not in the Old Testament. What's going on? And you're supposed to go to Acts and go, oh, it's talking about the prophecy from the Old Testament in Deuteronomy 18, 15 through 18. The Christ. As Joseph Smith says here. He said that that prophet was Christ. The man like Moses. In 103:16, who is Mormon. And 2 Nephi chapter 3, it's also Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith is the cornerstone Christ. The man like Moses is the capstone Christ for the latter days. And it's just for the Mormon church. If other people don't want to join, they're not going to be forced to. They're not going to have their baptisms done posthumously or their temple work done posthumously. And that's the strange thing. Everybody in the church complains about how long the endowment ceremony is, and the church has cut it down with editings over time. Getting rid of the death penalty, for example, but keeping the knife. And yet, none of that is supposed to be a part of it. It's just the washing and anointings that Joseph Smith had. No magic underwear, so there's no need for any explanation of the markings on the garments. None of that. It was just Brigham Young binding you, yoking you to Jesus. Which symbol is on the keystone of the Salt Lake Temple. And so, yeah, Malachi part is the day that shall burn as an oven. And next year is the bicentennial year. And there's a number pattern that is done here. Even though he comes in on the 21st in the evening, the other 3 times are on the 22nd. And so 4, technically for the 22nd, because the Jewish evening starts at 6 p.m. So it's technically the 22nd, but not in the English, because they don't use the English calendar. But that's how we can justify it. But then he has Joseph come on the 22nd for 4 years. Until he finally gets the plates and the heat dies down concerning William Morgan and his manuscript. And his official declaration by a judge that he's dead, so that his wife can be married to another man to take care of her and the kids. And so, yeah, the day that shall burn as an oven, with the coming of Elijah. You know, the Jewish holy day of Passover. The Jews purposely set their table with an extra seat for the coming of Elijah. They don't understand. They're waiting for Elijah to come and explain the scriptures to them and explain the prophecies. So I'll have to fill in for Elijah, which means the God Yah, which is Emmanuel, which is Jupiter, which is Zeus, etc. And this is just the Hebrew name for God. And it's his original name, because I've gone over with you, Yahweh is the new name given in 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 4, after finishing the creation. He's given a new name. Well done. Now you're given a new name. But they sort of take that part out, other than keeping him that he gets a new name. And so people then make the wrong assumption that it's from a different manuscript than the other manuscript of Genesis chapter 1. No, it's from the same Egyptian manuscript called the Heliopolis creation glyph. They just repeat it in a different form in chapter 2. But it's the exact same thing, because you have moisture watering the ground, and then the breath of life breathes into Adam. Heliopolis creation glyph. Nut and Geb are heaven and earth. Adam and Eve, technically Lilith, from Genesis chapter 1. She's the night, Lilith. That's where Lilith comes from, as Adam's first wife in Kabbalistic documents. Because remember, Joseph Smith is learning Jewish mysticism. That's Kabbalah. And so their Nut and Geb's parents are Tefnut and Shu. Shu is the breath of life. Tefnut is moisture. And so father and mother give birth to Adam, Geb. It's the same exact Egyptian document. And I guess because I deciphered Paleo-Hebrew and thus deciphered that the bigger pictures in picture scenes also need to be translated, and thus the characters given meaning in signless, but are not listed in signless. I'm the decipherer of those characters as well, to add to the signless. And I really need help. I'm so backlogged on what needs to be done. And so I'm trying to give you the information through YouTube videos. But, dear God, what a mess. I need somebody to type all this stuff out for me. If I were a professor at BYU, I could just have my students do all the work and then take all the credit. That's what they do. They don't do any actual work. They're supposedly the PhDs, and yet the students are doing all the work. And he's getting all the credit. Typical. But I do need help. And I'll have to wait for the end of the world and living in a cave with my generator and solar panels to charge up the generator to hook up my computers to, so that I can finally get closer to getting caught up before I die. But he talks about Elijah and the promises of fathers to children and children to fathers. And he adds, which is interesting that he adds it here, because you'd think he'd add it for Acts, but instead for Acts he puts in cut off rather than utterly wasted. But it's actually destroyed because it's after even that he starts using destroyed. Yeah, regarding his care of the plates, that he should not, treat them frivolously, otherwise he will be destroyed. So Joseph is playing with the words here from Scripture, because a literal translation of Acts, that specific part that he's talking about that's precise, that's different from Deuteronomy 18, is that it's not utterly wasted, it's utterly destroyed. But he uses utterly wasted for the Elijah passage in Malachi, and then talks about Acts as being cut off, not utterly destroyed, as it literally is from the Greek translation. But then uses destroyed in regards to his dealing with the plates. If he doesn't treat them right. It's hilarious when you know the background information. You're just filled with excitement and joy because you know things. You're in the know and nobody else knows because you're keeping it a sacred secret from everybody. Oops, I revealed the sacred secret to you, didn't I? And so, yeah, this is what he's now getting into. With Isaiah, we'll have to go to it to show you what that one's about, because he doesn't tell you. 11:10. And in that day, so the latter days, shall the root of Jesse, the father of King David, which shall stand for an ensign, flag of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek. Nope, the enemy took over. They replaced him. And his rest shall be glorious. Now it shall come to pass in that day, the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the house of Israel. He's talking about the gathering. And the gathering is by the man like Moses. Because Moses is with the Exodus, man like Moses is with the Exodus. Joseph tells us that the key of Moses in the Kirtland Temple during Passover with Elijah and Jesus and Elishua, if you saw my videos on that, and Elijah, God Yah, it's all the same character. But it's all the Christ. It's the same person. It's a mortal Mormon, sun god. And he who is from the crossroads, the sun god of the latter days. And so he's now telling us who our Christ is, since we now know it's not Jesus. And so Acts is used for this specific, precise wording in Acts that he will not tell us directly. He's making us study our Greek, our Hebrew, our Bible, and making us study on our own to figure it out. He's leaving us clues. Unfortunately, the church footnoted things, even though they got them wrong, and there's some errors, and blah, blah, blah. But it made it easier for me. And the Deuteronomy passage warns Mormons, because Joseph Smith turns it into Mormon. It's all about Mormon. That when he comes, Mormons need to hear his voice, or they're going to be utterly destroyed, cut off, or utterly wasted, or just destroyed. Whichever one you want to use. And so then Joel, second chapter of Joel, 28th verse to the last, which does not include, well, it does actually, if it's to the last, it would include the sun, moon, stars thing, but we can go to it and confirm. Yeah, 31. Sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood, which we just had yesterday morning, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. That's referring to a tetrad. They don't have stars here. He doesn't have stars. Other people have stars falling from heaven. But this is the tetrad of the latter days that we just finished. And what happens now is the Exodus of Moses for the new Israelites. When Solomon died, the kingdom was given to his son Rehoboam, or from the biblical Hebrew pronunciation, Rachab Achum. I butchered it, but it's not supposed, none of those, it's not phonetic. But but then there's Jeroboam, who splits the kingdom in half. And none of this is real, because originally it's Egypt, not Israel. And so the person writing First Kings, First Nephi, is talking about the division of Israel into the northern Israel that was eventually taken by Assyria, and the kingdom of Judah, which was taken by Babylon, the whore of apocalyptic literature, and the Book of Mormon. and the Doctrine and Covenants, section 1, verse 16. And it's Jeroboam who turned the rituals for his new Israelites. And his Sukkot, the gathering, the ingathering, Feast of Harvest, the gathering of the 10 tribes, lost tribes even, new Israelites, which comes from the Egyptian rituals, with the death of Osiris and his body parts being gathered back to Egypt, where the sacrament is derived from, not the church's website or videos. They're getting to the Book of Mormon video this last week about Jesus instituted the sacrament. No, the Mayans already had the sacrament. The tribe in Illinois already were performing the sacrament long before Jesus came to southern Illinois. And that's where the Temple of Bountiful is. Or supposed to have been. Mormons didn't build it. They didn't go on the Exodus in 2020 as they were supposed to. So this is the second harvest with the second Exodus, and this is the first day of the Feast of Sukkot of Jeroboam of the Israelites, the 10 tribes. And it's the week-long or 8 days long event as well. And so I'm hoping something happens, because otherwise you miss it. Again, you rebel against the king. Right, Bednar? He had to plagiarize the interpretation. Dear God. And so, the sun darkening, eclipses, moon turning to blood. Yeah, we just had that yesterday, didn't we? Lunar eclipses. And signs in the heavens for the latter days. And so yeah, he's reinforcing this with different prophecies from the Old Testament for you. And then talks about the Book of Mormon, that the Book of Mormon likewise is just a repeat of everything in a different form. Different characters, different stories, symbolizing as types and shadows for the latter day apocalypse. And yeah, and in the Ascension, that's Osiris ascending, with Horus ascending to the throne in place of his father who ascended to heaven. That's the symbol of that ascension. And so, yes, notice Nelson never, ever, 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 ever says that Jesus has ascended. He can't, because his Jesus is not the real Jesus. His Jesus never ascends. And if you're having trouble, Isaiah, and it's in the Book of Mormon too, tells you exactly who that never ascending Jesus is. So, wow, we're over an hour. So, we'll end here. But a whole different story. Whole different meaning when you get the truth. When you search for the truth. When you study and research the truth. Rather than trust the lies and cover-ups.